Dear students, we are now reaching towards the end of our lecture series, and at this junction we will be discussing about some of the remaining things which are important as far as operation of aircrafts on any airports are concerned. In that sense, we will be looking at the various visual aids, and these two lectures, that is this and the coming lecture, are devoted to this aspect only. In today's lecture, we will be looking at the visual aids related to markings which are provided on any of the components of the airport. So, in that sense, this lecture is being outlined in the following way. We will be looking at what are the visual aids, and then what are the markings which are provided for different components, specifically for runways and taxiways. In this connection, we are starting with visual aids. The visual aids are basically the things like they are the landmarks which are required so as to provide an aid to the pilots, so who are performing the landing or takeoff operations, and the major objective here is to maintain the safety of that operation. So, the various markings, various aids which are going to be provided in any of the form, they try to ensure that whatever operation is going on, the pilots and the related crews or the related controlling persons are in a position to visualize that this operation goes on smoothly and efficiently, at the same time maintaining the safety aspect of that operation. These visual aids, whatever the way they are provided, are required both in good weather condition as well as during the bad weather condition, or not only during the days, but also during the nights. So, it means the visual aids which are provided on any of the airport should have a universal applicability, and it should not be dependent on any of the aspect which may create its effect on the operation of aircrafts on that airport. The runways or the conventional aircraft appears as long and narrow strips with straight sides and free of obstacles. This is how it looks like. If we look on any of the runway strip, or if we are looking at any of such operations, then what we found is that those runway strips or the aircrafts which are using those runway strips, they looks like long and narrow strips with the certain straight sides which are defined, and we will be finding that they have been and marked in a certain way, so that we can clearly distinguish between the strips being provided or the surrounding areas, and then in all the cases these are going to be free of obstacles. The perspective view of the runways along with the landmarks like horizon, runway edges, runway thresholds and center line of the runway are the most important elements for pilot to see, because if any pilot is making a sort of an operation like there is a landing operation which is going on, then in that case it becomes very important for the pilot to understand that and to locate that where is the horizon, where the runway edges are, where is the runway threshold which needs to be crossed at a certain height with the specified speed, and then where is the center line of the runway along which the aircraft needs to be aligned, so that the safety is ensured while it is taking a landing. Similarly, is the case for takeoff, and we have seen when we have designed the length of the runway strip that during the takeoff also at the end of the runway strip or certain distance away from the runway strip, there are specific heights which needs to be maintained. So, in that sense, if we are looking at these considerations, then it becomes very important for the pilot to understand and to find out all such components, all such type of say markings or lightings or any other type of aid which is being provided, so that the pilot can make a perspective view of overall runway strip which they are going to utilize for landing or takeoff operation, and within that perspective view the whole of the operation will be taken care of. So, in this sense, if we have to enhance the visual information and so as to enhance that certain specific type of paints needs to be used, and these landmarks are painted in standard patterns which are going to be uniform throughout. They are generally defined by the bigger guiding agencies which provides the guidelines regarding these visual aids, and when we are using these in the standard pattern across all the airports or across the countries, then the pilots do not have any problem in understanding those patterns and the significance of those patterns, and on the basis of those significance of the patterns they can do the landing or the takeoffs. And therefore, there are certain specific colors which needs to be used, or if it is a lighting system, then again in that case also the different colored lights needs to be used, so that the visual information reaches the pilot in as clearly way possible so as to make a safe landing or takeoff. In that sense, the visual aids are going to perform certain purposes, and they are that there is a need to avoid accidents during landing of the aircraft. That is the one objective of providing the visual aids. Then the visual aids helps in conveying the pilot the ground to air information. This is the way by which the overall information which is available on the ground is conveyed to the pilot, so that they can arrange themselves, they can orient themselves with respect to that information for doing the operations. They direct the pilot during landing. This is another important aspect, because as we have seen that there are certain distances and there are certain points, like there is a touchdown point on the runway strip. Similarly, there is a lift off point on the runway strip. These points are all located on the strips in certain form, and the pilot understands that, and accordingly they orient themselves so that they can use that particular area which is being specified for that type of operation. And it also enables the pilot to locate and identify a particular feature. That is what I was just telling, that if they have to locate the touch off point, then they will be able to understand that where the touch off point will be coming, and so they can bring their aircraft with that altitude and speed, so that at the time of touching there is no safety hazard. And it grants safety to personnel and properties, and that is how it is going to happen. So, whosoever is traveling in the aircraft, the crew, the passengers, similarly the properties which are associated with it, like the aircraft itself, the cargo which is being transported, or the things which have been provided on the sides of the runway strips, everything needs to be maintained as safe as possible, and this is the way by which we can do it. Another important thing is that it also maintains an orderly flow of aircrafts. This is another important aspect, because if these type of markings are not being provided, say there is a runway strip which is utilized for unidirectional type of operations, that is from one end there is a takeoff and from other end there is a landing, then in that case the aircrafts cannot do the opposite operation on these particular ends. So, that is the thing which is there, that is there is a orderly flow of aircrafts. From the landing side there will be only landings, and from the takeoff side there will be only takeoff on the runway strip, as an example. And it also helps during takeoff as well as during taxiing, because the aircraft which has already landed on the runway strip can understand the other markings or other visual aids being provided, by which it can move towards the exit taxiways or the taxi lanes, or to the taxiways, by which it will be going towards the storage area or the aircraft stands where they will be taxiing, or where they will be holding, or where they will be going towards the terminal aprons. Everything is being defined in the terms of the visual aids, and the following those visual aids the aircraft can reach their ultimate destinations. And these visual aids, as we have been discussing, are available in different forms. They are available in the form of airport markings. or airport lightings or signages. So, these are the three ways in which we can get the different visual aids. Airport markings or airport lightings or signages, they are all related to various type of operations. They are all related to the different components which are provided on any of the airport, and that's way at each and every point we will be getting the information, and we'll be looking at all these three types of information during these two lectures. So, in this lecture we are going to concentrate only on the markings. In the next lecture we will be discussing about lightings and the signages. So, in that sense, once we have taken an idea and the objectives of providing the various visual aids, we start looking and discussing about the airport markings. The airport markings are the things which are basically provided on any of the component, and they are being provided in the form of the strips or in the form of the patches or in the form of the solid lines or in the form of the hollow lines or the cut lines. There are different ways in which these are done. They are perpendicular, they are angled, and they are used in all the components so as to define those things. In that sense, if we look at the various types of the markings which can be there, they can be grouped on the basis of the component where they are going to be provided. In that way, these are provided in the following groups, like apron markings, the landing direction indicators, the runway markings, shoulder markings, taxiway markings, wind direction indicator. So, once we have all these type of markings, then we will be starting now with the first one, that is apron marking. Apron marking provides guidelines which are marked on the apron to help the pilots in maneuvering the most critical aircrafts. So, most critical aircrafts means here is that whatever is the biggest type of the aircraft which is going to use the airport, then the operation of that one, the maneuvering of that one in terms of its turning, in terms of its movement, everything is guided by using the apron markings. And generally these are related to the path to be traversed during parking in or out operation near terminal, location of nose, etc. Means as we have seen previously when we have discussed about the terminal aprons. And the terminal aprons are being utilized by the aircraft so as to stand on that one very near to the terminal building where they needs to be loaded and unloaded. So, we have also looked at the various orientations or the type of parkings in which that can be done. Now, how an aircraft is going to be parked or how an aircraft is going to be taken out or taken in, or how it is going to take a turn, at what particular location it has to stop, and then there can be a loading and unloading. Everything is defined by using some markings which are provided on the pavement which is located on which the aircraft is standing, and that pavement is nothing but it is the apron. This is this type of thing we have observed in one of our lectures, and we will be looking at the same in this lecture too. In this case, when most of such things needs are provided by using yellow color. So, the yellow color painted things are provided on the pavement surface, and on the basis of that it is being defined. Another thing is that when we are using this color, or in that color should be fuel resistant, because there are all chances that during the filling of the aircrafts or during certain other maneuvers the fuel may spill, and that may create a problem to the such markings. So, that is one important specification of the paint which is used as a marking on the airports, that is they should be fuel resistant. This is one diagram which I was talking about and which we have looked at previously too, and this is one of the type of the marking which will be found just on an apron. This is basically the pavement, and the aircraft is going to come and stand on this pavement. And what is the orientation which this aircraft is going to take with respect to the building line? That is already being defined, that it is an angled condition, wherein this is coming with the nose in condition. This is angled nose in condition by which it is coming, because this is some angle theta with respect to the this building line or this building line, because this is L shaped building line being provided. And in that sense, if the aircraft is coming from this side, then it will be taking a turn and will stand in this form. So, if their turn is going on, then obviously it is to be defined in the form of the path this wing will be taking, and that is how it is being defined by this line, that is, this is the path which will be taken by the wing. Similarly, when it will be going out after the loading, then this will be taking a turn in this way. So, this is how it is going to take turn with respect to the this point of turning, which is found out on the basis of the main gear line and the steering gear line, and the point of intersection of these two is defining this turning point. So, when we are looking at this type of maneuvers, then this aircraft location is being shown as here, will be depicted on the pavement surface in yellow color, and then this type of path of the nose wheel or the inbound condition or outbound condition. So, this is the path of the nose wheel. First of all, the aircraft will come in this form, and then it will start taking a turn. So, this is how it will be taking a turn and will become in this condition. So, once it has done this, so this is how the nose wheel will be moving. It will be in the initial condition will be here, and then as it will start taking a turn, it will be taking a path like this. So, this is how it will happen, and then once it is being loaded, it is to be taken out. Now, this will be moving along this particular path. So, we have the outbound turning radius and we have the inbound turning radius, and the minimum radius with which it will be working, that is this value. So, likewise everything is defined for this sort of an operation, and some clearance with respect to the building line is also being provided, so that there is no damage to the wings of the aircraft while it is taking a turn and moving away from the building. The another type of indicator is landing direction indicator. This landing direction indicator is a helpful aid to the pilot at the time when they are coming to the airport and looking for a runway strip and the direction from which they can land on that runway strip. So, that defines the pilot, and the pilot will be able to visualize, pilot will be able to see that particular indicator, and on the basis of that indicator he or she will be orienting the aircraft so that they can land in that direction. So, this is what is it indicates the landing direction, and it is provided in the form of maybe an arrow, or T is placed at the center of a segmented circle. These are the two ways in which it can be provided. So, if it is not in form of an arrow, then there can be a segmented circle, that is a circle being provided with the cut-off lines, and then in the center of that segmented circle there can be a T shape being located. It is painted orange or is painted white in color. So, these are the two colors which can be used for this landing direction indicator. It is lighted for viewing during night time. So, if all these indicators which are provided, they are provided with the lighting system, so that the pilot can view, can locate these landing direction indicators during the night. They are fixed and they are at a distinct place. This is the T-shape landing direction indicator, which needs to be provided in some of the cases. In that case, there will be a encircling circle like this on this one, and that circle will be cut off at uniform distances. The size of this T is being defined here for a specific type of runway strip, and depending on the size of the runway strip there can be some modifications, but in general it is like 4 meter wide in this way. 0.4 meter wide is this strip. Similarly, this strip also is 0.4 meter wide, and this is again is 4 meters. So, this is the type of a landing direction indicator. Another indicator which is provided on any of the airport is the wind direction indicator, which helps the pilot to understand, to find out in which particular direction the wind is blowing. And this is important as far as to understand by the pilot that what type of forces needs to be provided at the time of taking off or at the time of landing. If the wind is coming in the crosswind component form, then what will happen, or if it is coming in a headwind or a tailwind component form, then what is going to happen. So, that will become very clear as soon as the pilot looks at this wind direction indicator, and it is generally provided in the form of a wind cone on all the airports. Generally, this is placed within a segmented circle together with the landing direction indicator. So, means the pilot need not to look to two different directions so as to locate both the information. Both the information will be available to the pilot at the same location, and it is in the form of a segmented circle on which a T is being placed, and then along with that T there is a flag sort is being provided on which a wind cone will be there, which moves in a certain direction indicating the direction in which the wind is blowing. Then it should be placed at a conspicuous place away from the building, so that it is not affected by the eddies, because if there is heavy wind is blowing, then if it is very near to the terminal buildings, then the eddies will be formed, and in that case it will not be useful to the pilot to understand the behavior of the wind. The panels forming segmented circles are gable roof shaped with a pitch of at least 1:1. That is the specification for the segmented circle which is provided. So, it is a gable shaped segmented circle. Panels are painted white in color, and the length of wind direction indicator should not be less than 3.6 meters, and its diameter at the larger end should not be less than 90 centimeters. So, this is the specification related to wind direction indicator. The length is being defined and the diameter is being defined at the larger end. It should be visible from a height of 30 meters. This is the height which is generally required at some kilometers away from the runway strip, that is the end of the runway strip or the reference point being taken with respect to the airport or the airport runway reference point. It is painted with bands of colors like white and black, red and white, orange and white, etc. This is the way it is provided. This diagram tries to show the same thing. This is one segmented circle as being shown here. The inside diameter of this segmented circle is 30 meters. Within this segmented circle, we are providing the landing direction indicator as being shown here. This is a T which is being located. So, this is trying to tell the landing direction, and then at the side of this one, this wind cone is being provided, which is showing that the wind is flowing in this direction here, and this will be in the form of like this. There is a pole, and the top of this pole there will be this conical form of surfaces being provided with 0.9 meter of the diameter at this side and 3.6 meter length of the cone. So, that is the minimum specification related to this one. At the same time, these segments which are provided or the panels which are provided, the sizes of these panels are also being specified. Here these panels are having a width of 0.9 meters to 2.4 meters, and the length is from 1.8 meters to 3.6 meters, and they are provided with the spacing between the panels, and the value is again almost the same way as being provided with respect to the length of these panels. So, that is how they are uniformly placed in this way. Now, once we have looked at these two type of specific indicators which helps during the landing operation, then now we are going to look at some of the markings which are provided on any runway strips which helps the pilot maybe during landing as well as during the takeoff. These are provided with the different purposes, and these purposes are like they have to be provided for the center line, they needs to be provided for the edge of the runway strips, or there is a numbering for each and every runway strip which we have seen in the previous some of the figures which we have discussed during some lectures where numbers were shown like 27, 9 or so on. So, that is the numbering of the runway strips, that all needs to be provided. Then as we have been discussing about the landing conditions, so touchdown zone, or it is also known as the landing zone. So, for that reason where this landing zone or touchdown zone is, that marking needs to be provided. Then there is a threshold marking which defines the specified height by which the aircraft should cross it, so that they can reach the touchdown point in a very safe condition. Then in case there are more of runway strips, then the markings related to those two or more parallel runway strips. Now, we look at the very first type of the runway marking which is provided, and this is runway center line marking. This runway center line marking is provided along the entire length of the runway strip. Now, this is one thing, because from very starting to the end this has to be there. Second thing is that it is not a solid continuous line, whereas it is a broken strip. So, as we have seen in the case of segmented circle, here it will be a straight line profile, but then again there will be certain length for which the center line will marking will be provided, and then there will be a gap between the two center line markings in this form. The length of the strip should be equal to the length of the gap or 30 meter, whichever is greater. So, that is the way this center line strip is provided. The length of the strip plus a gap shall not be less than 50 meter or more than 75 meter. So, in this sense, if we look with respect to the previous one where we are talking about that it should be equal to the length of the gap or 30 meter, whichever is greater, and if we assume this 30 meter is the greater value, then in that sense the gap is going to be 20 meters if we take the value of 50 meters, or otherwise if it is going to be more in the case of the length of the strip is taken more than 30 meters, then we can have again in this case something like 30 meters to 40 meters gap. So, depending on what length of the strip is being taken, and with respect to that we can find out the gap using this specification. The width of the strip shall not be less than 90 centimeter on precision approach runway strips, and 30 centimeter to 45 centimeter on non-precision approach runway strips. So, these is being defined on the basis of the type of the runway strips being provided, and the what type of approach is being provided for that runway strip, whether it is a precision approach means it is a instrumental condition where everything is being defined by the instruments, the altitudes, the speeds, the grades, everything, whereas in the other case it is a non-precision condition where such type of devices are not being used, and only using the markings and the standards known to the pilot the operations are carried. Another type of runway marking is runway touchdown marking. We will be looking at all these markings, like the first one which we have just discussed, that is center line marking. on one of the diagrams where a combination of these markings have been shown. Now, in the case of this touchdown marking, it is provided in the touchdown zone, and it consists of a pair of rectangular markings which are placed symmetrically about the runway center line. What happens is that the aircraft is coming along the center line on a runway strip, and it is coming slowly and slowly down. That is, there is a downward grade with which it is coming. So, these center line marking, these touchdown markings basically define the way the aircraft has to move and by what particular point afterwards only the touchdown can be done. So, therefore, there will be a zone in which this touchdown will be made. These markings which are provided on the both of either of the side of any center line marking of the runway strip, they are 1.8 meters wide, and they are spaced at 1.5 meter clear distance, that is from the end of one marking to the start of the other marking, the distance is 1.5 meters. The length of these markings are 22.5 meter. So, they are 22.5 by 1.8 with a gap of 1.5 meters. Here in this diagram, we are going to look at the combination of the runway center line marking and touchdown marking. Here in this diagram, we can clearly see the center line marking. This one is the center line marking as being shown here. This is 90 centimeter wide strip, and then there is a touchdown marking which is being shown in the form of 4 strips on either of the side as the start, then it reduces to 3 on either side, then it reduces to 2 on either side, and then it becomes 1 on either side. The length of this remains 22.5 meters, the width remains 1.8 meter wide, and the gap between the markings is 1.5 meter clear. So, starting from these 4 lines which are provided to the single line which is being located up to this particular distance, as we are providing them, that is the runway touchdown zone. So, the aircraft will be coming and will be touching at this location, and these strips are provided depending on the requirement. This number will be changing, there will be 4 strips and then the 3 strips and so on. Now, there is another diagram which is being shown here. This again tries to show the different type of the markings which can be there. Here we are showing the threshold markings at the bottom, which are like the zebra crossing markings, and this defines the threshold of the runway strip away from the end of the runway strip. So, it is at some distance from the end of the runway strip. This is the basic pattern which is provided, and here this is the aiming point marking which is located here. This bigger strip which is being provided at this location or at this location. This is usually at a distance of 400 meters from the end of the runway strip, and from this direction there is going to be a landing. So, this is a runway number marking which is 20 L, means L for the left, and 20 defines the angle at which this runway strip is being provided with respect to the overall angles of space, that is 360 degrees. So, it is 200 degrees is the angle in this case, and then this is the center line being shown in this basic diagram, and along with that one we have the touchdown zone markings as being shown as a single strip on both the sides, and it keeps on going up to this distance. So, this becomes the touchdown zone. Here in this case, as we have seen in the previous diagram, there are some more lines, like there is a 3 line and 3 lines likewise, and then there are 2 lines and so on, and then there is a single line, and finally we have this much distance which is defined as the touchdown zone marking. So, this is with the direction coding, and this is with the basic type of pattern. So, direction coding means this will be going in this direction for the landing. Now, we look at another runway marking, that is the edge strip marking, which defines the ends of the runway strips on the 2 sides of the center line marking. So, this runway edge strip consists basically of two strips. One is placed along each edge of the runway, and it is continuous in nature. In this case, the width of the runway, if it is greater than 60 meters, then the strip is located 30 meters from the runway center line. So, that is the way it is provided. Generally, these are 90 centimeter wide. This is in the most general width which is used for the strips. And there is another type of marking which we have seen in the previous diagram is the runway threshold marking. This runway threshold marking consists of a pattern of longitudinal strips of uniform dimensions, that is they are of same length and same width, and they are placed symmetrically about the center line of a runway strip, and they extend laterally within 3 meter of the edge of the runway strip. Means from the edge of the runway strip it goes up to the 3 meters from the sides. So, that is how they are located. So, on the basis of this particular specification, whatever are the number of strips needs to be provided for threshold marking will be computed based on the width of each marking as well as the clear gap between those markings. These are generally 1.8 meters or 3.6 meters wide with a spacing of 1.8 meters or 0.90 meters between them, and are 45 meter in length. So, these are the specifications for providing these markings. Sometimes it is desirable to displace the runway threshold, and it is usually adopted to clear obstructions in the flight path, because if there are certain obstructions which comes on the flight path, then if by just displacing the threshold means taking the aircraft to a certain further distance towards the airport, may clear those obstructions, and therefore, it becomes a safer movement. We look at the runway edge strip and the threshold markings in this diagram. What we can see is that here this was the center line marking which was which we have discussed previously. Then here with respect to this center line marking at this position, the center line marking could have is there. This is the alignment. With respect to this one, symmetrically we are providing the threshold markings on this side as well as on this side. So, they are starting at a distance of 6 meters from the end of the runway strip. So, this is what is the normal basic way of providing the threshold markings. These are 45 meters in length, and then as we have seen, the width is variable along with the gap being provided. Here the another type of marking which is shown is the edge strip marking, which as I have told is a continuous strip 90 centimeter wide and is located at the edge from this side as well as from this side. So, therefore, there is a pair of this marking, and these threshold markings can come within 3 meters of this edge strip marking. This is another diagram which tries to show the displaced threshold. Here the arrows are showing the direction in which the landing will be taking place. So, this is another type of landing direction indicator which is used on any runway strip. And then in case of the displaced threshold, a line is to be provided like this, which is 3 meters minimum of width and moves across the runway strip. So, it defines that this is the end of the runway strip in this sense, because we cannot use this end of the runway strip due to the obstructions, and then use the same way as we have done with the respect to the end of the runway strip from a distance of 6 meters, the threshold markings will be provided. And here the arrows which are being located, they are 36 meters in length with a clear gapping of 24 meters between the two arrow strips. Now, there is another diagram for this runway displaced threshold marking. We can see different type of ways of doing the same thing. This is the one which we have already seen, where this is this defines the now the end of the runway strip, and with respect to this we have the threshold markings, and this is the center line marking, and these are the arrows being provided this way. Different dimensions have been shown here. The other way of doing the same is in this form, and then there is a temporary displacement is there. That is why this is thinner line and the arrows are showing that you are moving in this direction. So, this is temporarily displaced threshold condition. This may be a temporary or a permanent displaced threshold condition. Then another type of marking is the runway numbering. In this case, the end of each runway is marked with a number which indicates the magnetic azimuth. That is what we have seen in the previous one diagram, that 20L was written. So, 20 is trying to define the magnetic azimuth, that is the angle measured in clockwise direction from the north of the runway in the direction of landing. So, if we move with respect to the north direction and in this form of clockwise direction, then at an angle of 200 degrees we are trying to show this runway strip, and for that it will be written as 20L. For like there is an example, there is an east end of east west runway would be marked as 27 for 270 degrees and the west end will be marked as 9 for 90 degrees. The magnetic azimuth is marked to the nearest 10 degrees value. Here in this diagram we are trying to show again that there are a number of runway strips which are intersecting with each other, and in that sense here this is 13, this is 13 is for this direction. So, this is 130 degree, whereas when we are looking at 31, so this is for this direction, it means we are going in at an angle of 310 degrees with respect to the north direction. Similarly, like this is 27 because we are going into 270 degree angle condition, or this is 9 because we are going towards the 90 degree angle condition. So, it is all respect to north condition. And this is another example which we have just discussed with respect to north, east and west, and that is having a value of 9 and 27. So, these are the runway numbering strips. Then 2 or more parallel runways if are provided on any of the airport, then in that case there is a specific way in which this is to be defined to the pilot. As we have seen in the previous one of the case that it was written 20L, it means that there are 2 runway strips, and in that case there will one will be a left runway strip, another will be a right runway strip. So, if there are more than one runway, in that case we will be using some of the letters so as to define what number of runway strips are being provided. And here, like for 2 parallel runways we will be using L and R. For 3 parallel runways we use left and right with the central. When there are 4 parallel runways, then there is a left and right on this side and left and right on the other side. When it is 5 parallel runway conditions, then we have L, C, R and L, R, like it depends in which particular way the parallel runways have been provided. So, we have one set which has LCR condition, and then there is another parallel set being provided which is defined by L and R condition. So, this gives the information to the pilot that there is another runway strip on the other side, and the pilot has to be careful with respect to the operation which are going on the other runway strip. These are the things which have been shown here. There is a number different ways by which this marking can be shown, like it is 20 being defined here, it is 9 meters long in this form. So, this is 9 meters long. Another way is that there is a 20L condition. So, 20L can be written as 20 with L as the bottom, or it may be 20 and L in continuation. That is the 2 way by which it can be done. And the other 1/3 way is that we can use this 20 within the threshold markings. So, this is the way this within threshold marking it is being done. So, there are different ways by which the runway markings can be provided. Now, in this diagram we can look at the various type of the markings which we have discussed so far, like these are the threshold markings being provided. Then there are the center line markings being provided like this. Then there are the touchdown zone markings being shown in this form, or this form. This is the fixed distance marker or the airline pointer. These are provided in the form. Distances are also being shown. Then there will be a edge strip marking to be located on this side, which is not being shown in this diagram. Apart from these runway markings, then the another set of markings are shoulder markings. Here the markings are in the form of yellow strips, which are again 90 centimeter wide, and they are provided at a distance of 30 meters from each other, but at the point where there is a turning, these are provided at a distance of 15 meters. The marking extends up to a maximum of 1.5 meter from the outer edge of the shoulder. So, whatever is the edge of the shoulder, from that point it goes up to a value of 1.5 meters. Runway shoulders are marked with diagonal lines, that is at an angle of 45 degrees, whereas the taxiway and holding apron shoulders are marked with strips which are perpendicular to the direction of travel of aircraft. So, that is how a pilot can understand that they are moving away from the runway and they are coming on the taxiway or holding apron. So, as soon as the markings becomes straight or perpendicular to the edge, it means the runway is over and they are moving on taxiway or holding apron. The blast pad at the runway end is marked with the chevron or V-shaped lines. So, we can have the V-shaped lines which defines that this is the blast pad, or from that particular direction the takeoff will be taking up on that runway strip. This is one diagram which tries to show the things like this is a runway strip. So, with respect to this runway strip, on the two edges the markings have been provided at an angle of 45 degree and they are located at a distance of 30 meters, but when it comes towards this turning area, then it will be located at a distance of 15 meters. Then here in this location a blast pad is being provided, and this is provided with V-shaped chevrons, that is the way it is being located, it is being provided, and the aircraft will be taking a takeoff in this form. Then here what we see is that in this one still they are the angle conditions. So, that is the part of the runway, and as soon as it comes to the holding apron, then they becomes perpendicular to the edge. So, we can look at these perpendicular strips being provided, and at the maximum they can go up to a distance of this 1.5 meters like this one, like this. And here this is the point of turn, and in between these point of turns it is located at a distance of 15 meters. So, this is how they are being located here. From the edge it is 1.5 meters from this side. Now, center line of taxiway consists of 15 centimeter. This is another type of marking which is 15 centimeter wide, and it is provided in the form of continuous strip of yellow color. So, along with this one there will be again the different other markings which will be there on a taxiway. One of the type of the marking we have already seen in the previous diagram, where we have looked at the edge markings provided on the taxiway also. Now, at the intersection with the runway end, the center line of the taxiway is terminated at the edge of the runway. So, that is the way, whatever the edge of whatever is the center line is coming from the taxiway, if it reaches the runway strip, then at the edge of that runway strip it will be terminated or stopped. At all other intersections with the runway, the center line of the taxiway extends up to the center line of the runway. So, we will be looking at these type of ways in which these markings are provided. At the taxiway intersection, the center line marking of the taxiway continue through the intersection area. So, if it is only taxiway intersection, then that can cross each other. For taxiway intersection where there is a need to hold the aircraft, a dashed yellow holding line is placed perpendicular to and across the center line of both taxiways. So, that particular line will define that aircraft needs to be stopped by this position if it is required. Similarly, at the intersection of a runway with an exit taxiway, the taxiway markings are extended onto the runway parallel to the runway center line, marking a distance of 60 meters beyond the point of tangency. That is with respect to the exit taxiway and runway connectivity. If a taxiway crosses the runway, the taxiway markings may continue across the runway, but with interruption for the runway markings. So, the runway markings should remain clearly visible, and there should not be any vagueness in understanding those markings with respect to the crossing markings being provided for taxiways. When the edge of full strength pavement of the taxiway is not readily apparent, the edge of the taxiway is marked with two continuous 15 centimeter wide yellow strips, which are 15 centimeter apart. So, here we can look at these markings in a diagrammatic form. This is the diagram which tries to show the markings with respect to this runway strip. This is the runway strip, the markings as we already discussed. Here there is a taxiway, there is the exit taxiway being provided. So, this is the center line of the exit taxiway which is going and ends at the edge of the runway strip. This is what we have already discussed. Here there is a holding line which is provided, and if a aircraft is to be stopped, then it is to be stopped by this point, so that there is no problem as far as the operation on this runway strip is concerned. This is another diagram which tries to define the connectivity of the runway strip with this taxiway, and here the center line markings have been extended up to the center line of the runway strip, and but are displaced by a distance of 0.9 meters from that one, and there is some distance by which it continues parallel to the center line marking of the runway strip, that is D, which is minimum 60 meters, and the rest of the things are as such, and this holding line is at a distance of minimum 30 meters from the end of the edge of this runway strip. This is a crossing of two taxiways, and therefore, it is permitted that the lines of or markings of the taxiways may cross each other as being shown here. So, these are the two center lines which are crossing each other. This is another diagram which tries to provide the connectivity between the runway strip, and this is the exit taxiway which is perpendicular to runway strip. Here the center line of this taxiway is going, and it extends again for a 60 meter minimum distance on this side as well as 60 meter minimum distance on this side, and remains parallel to the center line of the runway strip. This is another big diagram which tries to show the various type of connectivities. We have the runway strip on this side, we have the exit taxiway being provided at the end of this runway strip, then there is a perpendicular taxiway being provided to this runway strip, and then there is an exit taxiway, rapid exit taxiway being provided here, by which the aircraft which is coming in this direction can move away. So, all the three conditions with respect to the runway strips have been depicted, and the linings have been shown. At the same time, there is a crossing which is being shown here, which is with respect to this exit taxiway and the another parallel taxiway being provided with respect to this runway strip. So, the connectivities as well as the various markings have been shown at this location also. This is the diagrammatic view of the holding position markings, and its elaborated condition by which we can provide. There are two ways in which it can be done, where two parallel lines with the two segmented lines, whereas here it is two parallel lines which are jointed together by the perpendicular lines being located by the pair of perpendicular lines located towards the ends as well as the center. Now, we will look at another type of airport marking, which is closed runway or taxiway marking. In the case this is for temporary closed runways, then it is yellow crosses are placed at the two ends, which defines that it is temporarily closed. In case it is permanently closed, then the yellow cross one at each runway and at a 300 meter intervals are placed, and the threshold runway designation touchdown markings are obliterated. For temporarily closed taxiways, barricades with orange and white markings are generally used. In case there is a permanent closed taxiway, then a cross is placed at each entrance to the taxiway. This is the way generally we do this closed runway or taxiway marking. Here we can see that this is a cross being provided. The dimensions are being shown here, that is 1.8 meter wide, with this distance as 14.5 meters and this distance as 35 meters. And this is another type of cross marking which is provided. This is for basically the closed taxiway marking. So, this is for closed runway marking and this is for closed taxiway marking. So, this is what is related to the various type of markings which are provided on any of the airport in the form of the visual aids which helps the pilots to do certain operations like takeoffs and landings. In the case of landings, they are more important because the safety is to be ensured at the time of landing as well as at the time when it is to be the speed of that aircraft needs to be reduced by reaching the exit taxiway or rapid exit taxiways. So, this is the point at which we will be closing our discussion regarding the visual aids, and will continue the same in the coming lecture. Till then, goodbye and thank you to you.
Thank you.